Diversity at RCVS in 2022, Part 1. The dig. We left the RCVS diversity timeline in 2020, when President Neil Connell was gathering himself to declaim the shortcomings of our profession in respect of diversity, as RCVS defined diversity at that point. Whilst COVID restrictions saved the profession from his worst excesses, it did not stop the internal agenda at RCVS for diversity, inclusion, and equity. The Diversity and Inclusion Group was formed from representatives of organizations, some familiar and transparent, and others, which were led by activists, with unknown aims and unsubstantiated claims to represent their interest grouping. The dig had bare-bones terms of reference and principles which signally failed to identify the following: what diversity and inclusion meant, what would determine a successful outcome to their deliberations, who would determine the successful outcome, what legitimized the authority of those determining a successful outcome, and, without any of these, the dig was destined to be something timeless, without any resolution. As time has gone by, the dig has become a focal point for virtue signaling by the name group of political activists at RCVS. The dig has no fixed meaning, and no fixed end. It is forever, and whatever the name group choose it to be. As the reference point for diversity at RCVS, we shall look more closely at the dig and its strategy in this first episode. The messianic language of diversity at RCVS, in 2022. Here are some quotes from Neil, the chairman of the dig.
Yet these must not just be nice words. We need to take action. Be in no doubt. We must learn, and must also put our hands up. It's vitally important. All of this needs to be.
This is not the language of quiet and respectful leadership. These are imperatives being spoken here. Almost hectoring, with the voice of an autocrat, an ideologue, rather than a persuasive, respectful address from a humble man, representing, or leading the profession. In the absence of candor from the name group, explaining what is truly being demanded, we cannot divine a motive for this language. We can only speculate. One view might be that this can be explained as political rhetoric, which would be fine if the name group had ever built support for their political stance from the membership of RCVS, because the intersectional argument, being deployed as the process driver, creates an Overton window for the profession, where none existed before. It would also be a decent and honest admission to say so. Our profession doesn't exist without reference to society, but not admitting to the ideology in this polemic is disingenuous. Where's competence now? A quote from the dig strategy brochure.
It is vital that we are all able to work within a profession that is open, trusting, safe and, most importantly, diverse.
There's that imperative language again, and the claim that diversity is the supreme value in the profession. So, where does competence lie? A deep question might be how the dig is going to address the matter of competence, which we know is the basis of the extraordinary levels of public trust our profession has sustained over the last decade. We shall be returning to the tension between diversity and competence in the second part of the Diversity at RCVS in 2022 explanation. How does diversity help our common values? The dig strategy document claims,
Be in no doubt, this work is of benefit to all of us, and to animal health and welfare, and public health.
Could we reasonably ask the dig how exactly this political exercise ends up benefiting animal health, and welfare, and public health? Do we think an exposition of this link to animal welfare, public health, and the other cornerstone of the profession, the science of veterinary medicine, is worthwhile? The dig, from its outset, has no answers to this question, Yet, without a shred of evidence, it is certain. To quote Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., a judge,
"Certitude is not the test of certainty."
Statistics. The DIG strategy document uses a highly selective set of data, gleaned from the RCVS 2019 Manpower Report, as the basis for some of its claims for legitimacy. A link is provided in the description section accompanying this video. We all know the danger of statistics, and the DIG's audience is a group of veterinary scientists, trained to be critical thinkers, and trained to evaluate evidence. We also know that all publications need to be edited, so given those limitations, what do we think of the statistics used in the DIG strategy document? The increase in ethnic diversity is given a chronological context. But the gender demographic is presented as a snapshot. So, one of the critical diversity measures is presented as changing, and the other as static. Why would that be? How does that enlighten and inform the DIG's endeavors, and help the DIG make the profession change? Then there's the implied social mobility measure, looking at which schools educate veterinary surgeons, where there appears to be less than a third coming from fee-paying schools. Well, that's interesting, but exactly what point are the DIG making? Are they saying that there is a problem of underrepresentation of non-selective or non-fee-paying schools? And, if so, what levels of representation should there be? To go with this, a reasonable, but overlooked consideration, might also be to ask about the type of education that the 25% non-UK graduate veterinary surgeons in the profession have had, if you're only curious about how they are educated, rather than making some other, partisan, political point. How much diversity and inclusion and equity is enough? The DIG strategy document makes no mention of how we will know, when we have reached the sweet spot, the point where, using any of the intersectional measures alluded to in their strategy document dataset, adequate diversity and inclusion has been achieved. What are those targets, and just as importantly, who gets to decide what they are? The DIG is an entity that drives politics and culture at RCVS in 2022. It can never end its deliberations, it uses authoritarian language, and it creates more questions than it answers. In the second part of these videos, we will be looking at whether or not the DIG is needed, because of the post-COVID and post-Brexit veterinary employment market, as it prevails in 2022.